parliamentary leadership roles, among other issues. Melita Olutenges, NTV.
Martha Karua having stated there that the hot air Chief Justice Martha Koome made of their case will carry her to the East African Court of Justice. Now, sticking with the 2022 presidential election, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission chairperson Wafula Chebukati has accused former Jubilee Party Secretary General Raphael Tuju of character assassination amid allegations that the chairperson and two other commissioners plan to auction votes to him at his Karen home. Chebukati claims Commissioners Abdi Gulie and Boya Mulu arranged the meeting out of kindness after Tuju was involved in an accident. Brian Abuya has that story.
The Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission has begun a post-election evaluation workshop in Mombasa. Chebukati said in his opening remarks that he and the two commissioners went to Tuju's house after receiving an invitation from the former Jubilee Party official himself. The IBC chair said that Tuju allegedly attempted to exploit this gesture in order to influence the August 9 elections. Part of Chebukati's 7-page speech reads that Raphael Tuju falsely tried to infer ill motive to a visit to him by the three of us when he was involved in a gruesome road accident that nearly claimed his life. He attempted to take advantage of a benevolent gesture of visiting him in 2021 on his own invitation to achieve the malicious end of maligning our image before the public. Chebukati's alleged truth comes after Tuju dared the two commissioners to disclose details of their meeting, saying he was ready to provide CCTV footage to prove that the commissioners went to his house. The row between Chebukati and his deputy Cherera appears to widen after Chebukati once again called out the dissenting commissioners at the post-election evaluation meeting in Mombasa, insisting on their involvement in the election. Chebukati saying it is therefore insincere for any member of the commission and senior staff to allege that they were barred from providing assistance to the election management process. It is even tragic that some members of the commission will petition the Supreme Court to nullify results of an election that we collectively worked to deliver. Now Chebukati wants the violence at Bomas, the falling out in the commission, and staff alleged mistreatment investigated. He says with assurance that all these incidences that border on criminal culpability cannot be swept under the carpet and assume a normal state of affairs. We must confront and address this issue in order to secure a conducive environment for staff. As we deliberate, we remain alive to addressing these issues with finality. Brian Abuya, NTV.
123 petitions have been filed in various courts across the country challenging the result of elections for various positions. At least 12 governors will try to defend their victory as declared by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. However, this figure is lower than those previously filed following the 2013 and 2017 general elections. Martin Mwangi has that report.
123 election petitions for various seats have been submitted, according to the judiciary. On 14th September, 12 petitions challenging governor elections, 2 for senator, 4 for women representatives, and 28 for National Assembly members were submitted to the High Court. The Magistrates Court has received 77 more cases disputing the election of county assembly members.
Of the Assumption of Office of Governor Act.
The 12 gubernatorial election petitions include that of Busia County, with Sakwa Bunyasi challenging Governor Paul Otuoma's election. Siad Abdullahi and Hassan Adam petitioned against Nathif Jama's election as Garissa governor. Former Tana River Governor Hussein Dado is challenging Dado Godana's election. Evans Kidero disputes Gladys Wanga's election in Homa Bay County. Purity Wangoi Ngirishi and Eliud Wanjao Ngige contested Anne Waiguru's election. Katome Tito and Pere Judy want Joseph Olelenku's second term in Kajiado County invalidated. Justin Ringa Chirume is challenging Kilifi County Governor Gideon Mungaro's election. Moitalel Ole Kenta is challenging election of Patrick Ole Ntutu of Narok. Dennis Omwenga Ayera has petitioned the election of Nyamira Governor Amos Nyaribo's election. Vihiga and Narok County Senate elections have been challenged. For women representatives, Garissa, Kisii, Kilifi, and Nyamira counties have been contested. Former MPs Maoka Maore, Kanini Kega, and former Bahati MP Kimani Ngunjiri are among those challenging the election of members of National Assembly. 388 petitions were submitted after the 2017 general election. This, over 100% increase from 2013 with 188 petitions. Martha Karua, who was then challenging the election of Kirinyaga Governor Anne Waiguru for her first term, moved up to the East African Court of Justice. The court awarded her about 2.7 million Kenya shillings as damages for infringement on her right to a fair trial. Martin Mwangi, NTV.
Consensus will be the way to go in selecting the next Council of Governors leadership. Deliberations are still ongoing with Kenya Kwanza Alliance and Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition battling it out to secure the position of the chairperson and the committee leadership. NTV's Kevin Mutai also reports that President William Ruto is expected in Mombasa on Saturday for the inauguration of the winners, even as serious lobbying continues with regard to their bid to take over the council's leadership.
The governors are in Mombasa for a 3-day induction exercise, but the key agenda is the elections for various positions at the Council of Governors.
You hang around a young lady without declaring your intentions, you will end up fetching water during her wedding.
Kenya Kwanza and Azimio One Kenya formations have locked horns in the race for the chairperson of the council, with Kirinyaga Governor Anne Waiguru being the preferred candidate from the ruling coalition. Governors Hamed Abdullahi of Wajir, Mutula Kilonzo of Makueni, and Joseph Ololenku from Kajiado County are jostling for the top leadership as talks continue to settle on the formidable candidate.
Na imani pia wazee nao kuna nafasi ambazo watatupatia sisi kama kina mama. Kwa hivyo na imani uchea tunaweza chukua sisi kina mama, na nafasi zingine za committees pia tunaenda kuchukua kama kina mama.
To deepen devolution, the council need a leader or a governor or a chairman that will be able first of all to articulate the issues of interest and bundling more functions in their counties. Of course, the issue of timely disbursement of funds is a very big issue.
They will also be electing the deputy chairperson, the whip, as well as filling the positions of the various committees within COG. NTV has established that there's a fierce battle in the health, agriculture, finance and economic planning, as well as the education dockets, with a section of governors revealing that the sectors are of key interest to President William Ruto.
The elections are held by consensus, and that's intended to keep the council united, not to create a division whereby people voted against one another.
Interesting enough, we have all agreed that it's not about Azimio or it's about Kenya Kwanza. What we've just agreed is we will build caucus for a person who will represent the interest of the governor's welfare, because there are pertinent issues that needs to be dealt with.
The rivalry between the two factions is also expected to play out in the elections, with both sides banking on their numbers.
That buffaloes don't move together in a herd because of liking each other. They move together because of the danger of walking alone. So you work together. You have a better bargaining power. You have a better leverage when you work as a team.
COG leadership is an influential position that informs key decisions within the counties and considered close to the executive.
But we believe that we know each other now well, especially those who have been serving. Even those who have not been serving, they have been in various positions in parliament, others in corporate world. So we know each other and we will make the right decision.
The elected county chiefs will serve for a term of 1 year. Kevin Mutai, NTV in Mombasa.
Interesting analogy there from Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. Buffaloes do not move in herds because they like each other. They do so because It is safer than being alone. All right, let's take a look at the news diary. And parliamentarians from both sides of the political divide, that is Azimio la Umoja One Kenya and the Kenya Kwanza Alliance, are meeting with the Azimio in Stone Athi and Kenya Kwanza in Naivasha as they strategize with regard to the House leadership. Speakers have already been elected, but House leadership positions as far as committees and even majority and minority leaders are still up for grabs. And in Mombasa, the governors continue their induction retreat. And I believe, am I missing anything? IBC holds post-election evaluation meeting, and that's pretty much it that we have on the diary this morning. And having looked at that, let's take a look at the stories making headlines. Walk with me. Let's take a look at the Daily Nation and front page. That story that captured headlines yesterday as well. No small matter, and that is regarding removing the subsidy on petrol. Ensuring the flow of cheap fuel at all costs, the subsidies for kerosene and diesel were also slashed. Ruto's hard choices on economy. President William Ruto's bold action to scrap the petrol subsidy has brewed public discontent following a surge in prices with the expected ripple effect on consumer prices, but could pay off in the long run should the decline in global crude costs continue. At a glance, manufacturers and public transport operators warn consumers to brace for higher commodity prices and fares following a rise in food and electricity, in fuel and electricity costs. A government facing ballooning expenditure amid limited resources, confronted by unrelenting pressure to cut numerous, beg your pardon, this I can't really make out, but to cut, let me get my hard copy. To cut numerous taxes blamed for high petroleum costs and reduced fuel import costs keep the price of petrol. Let me just bring this down. Keep the price of petrol below 200 shillings despite removal of costly subsidy, with the trend expected to stabilize prices in the long term. Now, the other a big story on the front page of the Daily Nation, and one on which I'd like to engage my two out of four panelists have made it into studio already, is this: Raila revisits Supreme Court ruling. I'm joined by Nathaniel Omongare, who is ANC Director of ICT and Programs. Karibu sana.
Thank you so much.
Good to have you. First time on NTV?
No, this is my second time.
Second time?
Yeah.
Who hosted you first?
Salim Swale.
He beat me to it, it appears. I'm also joined. Karibu sana. I'm also joined, but first time on AM Live. So
yes,
at least I can claim that one.
Exactly.
All right. And I'm also joined by Karidhi Wambui, who is a nominated MCA. He's come all the way from Nyeri County at this hour,
sure.
Nominated on a UDA ticket. Congratulations. Let me start there. And Karibu. Nathaniel, you also sought elective office?
Yes, I vied for the position of Member of Parliament in North Mogirango constituency in Nyamira County. Unfortunately, I wasn't successful. It was my first bid. I polled position 4 out of 17 candidates.
17?
Yeah, we were number
in your
one.
First attempt?
In my first attempt. So,
congratulations.
It was a very good attempt. I know next time it will be far much better.
All right.
And I'll be better prepared.
Karibuni sana. We also expect Ascon Kamili, who is a youth policy analyst from the Azimio camp. And we also expect, who am I forgetting? Kidimwaga Kanu. It looks like the Kenya Kwanza guys are the early risers. But gentlemen, what did you make of the remarks made by Raila Odinga yesterday? Let me put it this way. The attack on the judiciary, it was, I don't think you can put it any other way, a no-holds-barred attack on the judiciary. What did you make of it, Nathaniel?
First of all, thank you for hosting me, Olive. I'm very humbled in this show. Second, Raila Amolo Odinga is a decorated politician in Kenya. He has struggled all his life, I think the entire adult of his life, to try and institutionalize democracy. You know, we know the credentials that he holds in this country. However, yesterday, when I saw him making those remarks, I could see a leader who has lost track of his credentials. I could see total utter hypocrisy on his hand, because before the Supreme Court ruling was announced, there was a very clear public statement that is going to abide by the ruling of the Supreme Court. This is a clear demonstration that if any institution that disagrees with Raila Amolo Odinga, then it is on the receiving end of attacks. This is not the first time. It is a clear pattern that we have seen all the way from 2013 when the Supreme Court did not agree with the results. Unfortunately or fortunately, in 2017, the Supreme Court agreed with him, and the Supreme Court was a good institution. But when the Supreme Court or any other institution doesn't agree, I think with the ODM leader, it becomes a subject of attack. And this is bad for the growing institutions in the 2010 Constitution. We need to respect institutions, especially the independence of institutions. And I like the way the President of Kenya has started, Dr. William Ruto. He's coming out as somebody who is strong in supporting the independence of institutions, unlike the statements that were made by Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga. This is unfortunate of a leader in that caliber, and the least I expected from the ODM leader is to honorably exit the stage. Nigerians say that if you dance too long on the stage, then you are likely to face a scenario whereby you will bore the audience. So the ODM leader is finding himself in a very difficult territory of trying to defend his credentials. I honestly think this is the time Raila Amolo Odinga should have called it quits on the stage, mentor other young leaders who are upcoming within his rank and file, so that he can be able to hand over power to the next generation within his rank and file.
Right.
So I think this is an unfortunate attack on the judiciary.
Okay. Unfortunate attack, and Nathaniel Nathaniel is of the position that Raila Amolo Odinga had no problem with the judiciary when they annulled the 2017 presidential election. Now that they have upheld William Ruto's win, he now appears to have a problem with the judiciary. He's used the term hypocritical. Do you agree with him?
First, I want to say thank you for having me here, and to my brother Nathaniel, who is a comrade at my university. He was a student leader, but I came after him, so I'm happy to have met him here. What I would say about Raila Odinga and the remarks he made yesterday, it was expected of him because the way he thought that he was having his last shot, and unfortunately it never went the way he thought. You remember during the campaign, he was so confident that this time round he has all the machinery he needs. But unfortunately, or by the way of the Kenyans, the way they exercise their democratic right, he did not become the winner. And actually, for me, I feel that even the words, to some extent, they are kind, because you'd have expected him, to react in much more than the way he reacted. So the way my brother Nathaniel is stating, like in 2017, the courts were heroes, at that time when they nullified the election in his favor. Remember when he was given the win, he later, did not show up. He later did not show up for the subsequent election in 2017. Therefore, I didn't expect him, to rejoice in any way, because even that time when he was handed the win, he never went back to the election. Therefore, he made the judiciary, look full of itself, because you're given a win, and the ruling is that you go back to the election again for a rerun. But he absconded the elections. So I would say it's also unfortunate remarks, because what we are trying to do is to strengthen, the independent institutions, to ensure that the rule of law is taking its course. And he was confident when he said that once if there's anything, he'll go to court. But of course, when he is going to court, he expected two decisions. It's either a win for him or a lose. And if you look the way the judges made their arguments, is that, it was hot air. The kind of evidence that were taken to court, couldn't even have a quarter of the threshold required. And therefore, to Honorable Raila Odinga, I think he's still having the hangovers, and knowing that he's exiting the stage, the fact that he borrowed an extra bullet. You remember in 2017, he said that he had one more bullet, and this time I don't know where he got another one. Maybe he was using an arrow. That's why he missed the target. And for him, what I would wish is that he exits the stage, nurture other leaders, you know. But what we are trying to come out is the fact that we need to transition, you know, from the tribal politics. And, you know, we have so many young leaders or other good leaders in his Azimio coalition. He can exit and leave others, because what we are saying, and you had Dr. William Samoei Ruto in his address saying that he's going to strengthen the opposition to ensure that they are keeping the government in check. And that's the only way. If he loses, he takes his position as the opposition leader and allow the government of the day to continue, because we as young leaders, as young people, what we need is to protect our future. And I wouldn't expect that he would want us to take us back to the maandamano shenanigans. And at the end of the day, what we really want is democracy to prevail, the rule of law to prevail, and we move forward as a country.
And I think that is the argument he sought to make yesterday. He said this is not about him. This is about 2027 and reforms as far as the IEBC is concerned, and also he took issue with the judiciary. But Nathaniel Wambui here, Karithi, says he expected a more explosive reaction. You said you thought the words he used were kind.
Yeah.
Speaking of last bullets, Kidi Mwaga, how are you?
Good morning, Olive.
Good morning, Kidi Mwaga, Kanu Youth Congress. Yes. Good to have you with us. Have you met Nathaniel and Karithi before?
I am meeting Karithi for the first time. Nathaniel has been a comrade in the trenches until when he decided to abandon the side of the politics that is, you know, known to, you know, be advancing the cause of the people. Yes.
So it looks like you're all comrades at one point. Karithi told us he was a comrade with Nathaniel at Moi University, and now you tell us when he was in NASA, you are comrades.
Yeah, we were comrades in NASA.
All right.
And then he bolted out.
Do tell us.
No, he remained on the wrong side of politics.
So tell us, Kidi, what did you make of the remarks made by Raila Odinga yesterday with regard to the judiciary?
Well, I think that the utterances by our presidential candidate speaks to the frustration of the entire constituency that belonged to the Azimio, because it is instructive to note that the Supreme Court, in its infinite wisdom, while delivering the judgment, elected to use less than judicial language. Well, counsels, advocates, appear before judges over and over again. But then any time judicial officers choose to use less than judicial language, we have always seen reprisals. For instance, in this country, we the people of Kenya put in place what was called the Judges and Magistrates Vetting Board that was chaired by Mr. Sharad Rao. When Sharad Rao was doing his work, the judicial officers, fairly competent, but then they were removed from the bench on account that while advocates appeared before them, they would talk down at advocates. They would address advocates at using less than judicial language. And when the Supreme Court, which is the only court with jurisdiction to hear and determine disputes relating to presidential election, choose to, you know, call advocates for the petition of the party with the adjectives that were directed at the Azimio lawyers, then you are left wondering if the matter was decided on account of the evidence before it in isolation, or there were other extraneous factors that were in play. So yes, it expresses the frustration of that constituency.
Okay, so your issues with the language, not the judgment?
Language is a tool, not only of trade, but also of governance. So that when the Supreme Court elects to use that language towards the councils, then it, in a big way, begin to undermine the credibility of that judgment.
But are you saying the Supreme Court judges need to massage egos?
Not quite.
If it was hot air, it was hot air. If it was a wild goose chase, it was a wild goose chase.
Olive, you
Because
will agree
if
with
you
me.
argue-
We will agree with me that when panelists come on NTV, sometimes we disagree, even with the views of panelists. But as someone who has watched I'm Live for quite some time now, I must say that NTV has always been kind to people who show up on NTV. I think that it would have been better, it would have been more decent if the Supreme Court, in expressing, say, its disagreement with the petitioner's case, elected to do so in a language that, expressed that it is a court that places premiums in dignity, in decency, and all that. Thank you.
All right. But speaking of language,
Yes.
do you think then it was also statesman-like? Because you're calling the hot air and the wild goose chase, what did you call it? Less than judicial language.
Yes.
But is it statesman-like for the language that Raila Odinga deployed or used yesterday with regard to the judiciary?
It must be said, I said that his statement expresses the frustration of that constituency. And so over time today, the Azimio team are headed to a retreat, and there will be a lot of housekeeping and deliberations on the way forward. So over time, I think such frustrations will come down, and both sides will begin to use languages that then dignify our country, that ensure that our democracy generally moves forward to the right direction.
All right. Nathaniel, you look like you have a rejoinder.
Yeah, I think I beg to disagree with my friend Kidi Mwaga. First of all, the proceedings of the Supreme Court were aired live. I think even NTV, we were following the proceedings from all the media stations. We could see, you don't need to be an advocate or a lawyer to be able to see the kind of evidence that was being produced before the Supreme Court. Even an ordinary villager could see that the Azimio did not have a watertight case, to say the least. I must be wondering, the judges, while drafting the judgment, they were in a very difficult spot to try and find the right words in the dictionary to describe. In fact, they tried their best to describe the case as it should be. If you look at some of the evidence that was being produced before the Supreme Court, clearly, for example, yesterday, the Prime Minister referred to Jose Camago case, the form that was produced. It was clearly an overlay, and now Azimio is trying to put heavy premium on that case, and we could all see that it was clearly an overlay, and it was explained ably. The Azimio team itself, from my brother here, did not have agents. I was on the ground. In my constituency, I did not see any Azimio agents guarding the presidential vote. So they could not have parallel tallies to compare against, that it was very clear. So for judges to say that this was hot air, they were taking the court on a wild goose chase. In fact, those were the right words. The dictum they used was the right word. In fact, they were very generous with their words, to say the least. However, I want to thank the Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga for because the ruling and the entire process in the electoral cycle has put Kenya in the world map as a country that is able to litigate its own problems internally without resorting to violence. It is a very good note, and we want to thank him for taking the judicial route, even though he disagrees. I only think that he needs more time in the Spice Island. He should not have come earlier. Maybe he has not fully healed. He needs more time to do some holidays so that he is able to heal more. Otherwise, if he's continuing on this trend, he's going back to the opposition leader. And honestly, I think this is the right time. The Prime Minister needs to hand over the baton to people like Kidi Mwaga and the rest in the rank and file of Azimio. He doesn't need to dance too long on the stage.
All right. We have been joined by Ascon Kamili. He's no stranger to AM Live and the Youth Perspective on Friday mornings. Ascon, umetoka Kanan?
No, you know, it's actually been long since I was here, right? But we're okay now. The country has to move forward.
The country has to move forward. Yesterday, Martha Karua made a similar statement, despite saying that those in office walinyakua. She did say, but life has to continue. Is she and Raila Amolo Odinga, are they reading from different scripts? Because Raila Amolo Odinga doesn't appear or sound to be ready to move forward, because he's talked about he's threatened a 1 million march to unseat the judges of the Supreme Court.
Well, it is within Raila Odinga's rights to exercise, such opportunities as to picket and to, organize for 1 million march. And we cannot stop a political organization from doing such things. If they don't agree with the decision of the Supreme Court, while they respect it, they could do anything about it. So I don't think it's something to bash Raila Odinga on. What I really believe is the election has been conducted, and Kenyans took part in the elections, and Kenya has to move on generally, the way Martha Karua said. She was advising the governor from Mombasa to collaborate with the government of the day, but they should collaborate from a point of authority, not from a point of kneeling down and begging. While we probably don't agree that William Ruto should have been the president, we should give him a chance to rule the country. I remember when Barack Obama came to Kenya, I think it was around a few years ago, and he was talking about the way a country should move forward. And at that point, he had met Martha Karua and Raila Odinga as the opposition at that time. So he was saying that when you want to wish your country to fall, then you cease to be a patriot, So we cannot wish that Kenya Kwanza fails so as to prove that we love Kenya so much. We can only wish them to make it. Then we can, get a chance later to rule the country.
All right, interesting sentiments there. Karidhi, Nathaniel, to your right, talked about Raila Odinga being a hypocrite. But I'm curious, we are going on a break, but think on this. When Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto were forced to go back to the ballot in 2017, they weren't too happy about it either. In fact, it is, yes, the Daily Nation, how they've phrased this particular headline is this: Raila revisits Supreme Court ruling. Remember anybody else who used this term? Yeah, sure. Revisit. We take a break. We'll be back with more.
Safaricom Foundation is uplifting communities by bringing their dreams to reality through Ndoto Zetu.
Wakati tumereceive hii machine kutoka Safaricom Foundation, hata tunauza zaidi. Asanteni sana Safaricom Foundation kwa kutujali.
Apply online or visit any Safaricom shop near you. Application deadline is 15th September 2022.
Ndoto zetu, uwezo wetu, Safaricom Foundation.
Dust off your Subaru and upgrade your Lexus, because Coop Bank is now offering 100% financing on used cars. With Coop Bank pre-owned car financing, anyone with an income can walk into a second-hand dealership, select the car that best suits them, and get financing from Cooperative Bank. To find out more, walk into a Cooperative Bank near you for details. Terms and conditions apply.
Your generosity imesaidia kuignite a love for reading in our children. Nunua any Cadbury Story Edition packs, scan QR code, na generously share your homegrown story. Cadbury, there's a glass and a half in everyone.
I realized that the head, the eyes, the ears, and all those things, I actually can feel them through the big toe.
Foot is mapped into zones. So for example, if your client is suffering from bloating, you don't have to go direct to the stomach. there is a reflex points at the foot.
So we have 2 feet, right? Yes. So when I come to you and I say I have a headache, right? Do you know whether to work on the left feet or on the right?
I'll have to do every part of the body, because maybe the client can say she has migraines, but I can feel some crystal deposits on other parts. So it also shows that she has another issue.
Get an unsecured loan of up to 2.5 million shillings within 24 hours. Allow us to fully finance your water project, piping, solar installation, distribution, and your short-term working capital. Visit any Family Bank branch for more information.
All right, welcome back to AM Live. My panelists are already engaging each other on this subject of revisiting. Karivi, I had asked you a question. When you say Raila Amolo is hypocritical, did you say the same when Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto took issue with the judiciary, in fact going as so far as to say they would revisit?
You see, Raila Odinga in 2017 did not actually even agree with the ruling, because even what the ruling said is that there should be a reland, but he never participated again. So, I mean, he has all these reasons not to believe and to agree in what the court rules. Even the court rules in his favor, he never worked with the ruling. He went against what the court, the directions given by the court. And my friend here is talking about the words that were used. Remember, the Azimio coalition, came with all manner of evidence, put in a canter full lorry, and there was nothing in it. And I think the judges were justified, to say that all those papers that were brought there, they were hot air. But remember, in his story about the Canaan, and how he's going to take people to the promised land, I mean, Raila might have been correct, because even in the Bible, only Joshua and Aaron made it. And in this case, Musalia Mudavadi and Moses Wetangula, who were his coalition partners in 2017 when they were on their journey to Canaan, I think making Raila to be the Moses of the day and Joshua and Aaron to be Wetangula and Musalia Mudavadi, the case is justified. Moses never made it to Canaan. Today we are having Moses Wetangula and Mudavadi in government. But what we are saying as a country is that we really need to move forward. The way he now says that he was to bring a million march to try and force his way in. This is just the way we expected, that he would want to push a half of the government. I don't think really he's fighting for democracy, using all these methods. What I expect, or what I suspect, is that he's trying to push his way into the government. He has tasted the government since 2018 handshake. And I know it is painful for him to understand that from now going forward, especially at his old age, he's not going to enjoy the privileges of power. But what is more important is that he needs to realize, or the Azimio coalition and the brigade in Azimio need to understand that we have a country that must move forward. We have 43 million Kenyans who need peace and who need to afford meals in each and every day. And therefore, we cannot hold the country hostage. We need to let it go. We need to let the government of the day to work. And you have seen Deputy President, folding his sleeves, and he has gone to work. And therefore, for the Azimio Brigade, especially Honorable Raila Odinga, he needs to understand that now he's old and he's becoming senile. He has to hang on the boots.
No. I will draw the line at that. I will draw the line at that. But let me phrase a question for Kidi Mwaga here. So basically, you're saying he should mentor other leaders.
Other leaders, yeah.
Okay, I'll leave that one at that. But isn't there a lay-down procedure, Kidi Mwaga, if Raila Amolo Odinga believes the judges of the Supreme Court did not perform or live up to what is expected of them? Is there not a lay-down procedure for how judges should be removed?
Well, there is a lay-down procedure in law on how a judicial officer who, say, flouts the Chapter 6 of the Constitution, the Leadership and Integrity Act, may be removed from office. And certainly it is something that anyone who thinks that the judges of the Supreme Court engaged in, you know, in a less than charitable conduct would want to, a route that anyone who thinks that the judges engaged in a less than charitable act would want to follow. But then before I go there, I think I take great exception to the choice of syntax that my brother here has decided to use this morning towards and against the person of Raila Amolo Odinga. I think that we also have a president that some of us did not vote for, but we have not turned this panel to try to talk ill about the president. So I think my brother be advised that Raila Amolo Odinga is an elderly statesman, who represents almost half of the country, or at least half of the country voted for him. And therefore, as young people on this panel, we must exercise restraint while speaking about any of them. Going forward, in regards to removal of judicial officers, I think that we look at the statements of Raila Amolo Odinga from a perspective of a constituency that, of course, was going to the election believing legitimately that they would win an election. But then the very nature of elections is that it can go either way. And some of us personally, I mentioned here last time that when the declaration was made the first time, there was the initial shock to deal with. But eventually we went to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court made its determination. The way our constitution is structured is that it is only the Supreme Court that enjoys jurisdiction on matters regarding to disputes on presidential election. And so because there is no chance of appeal, it means that the party that does not get a favorable judgment from the Supreme Court will certainly express certain frustrations. And that is natural. So I don't think that there is so much to read in the statement by Raila Amolo Odinga. Thank you.
All right. And I'd like us to move on to IEBC because Raila Amolo Odinga did reference the IEBC in his statement yesterday. And he said that if there is any attempt to remove the Cherera 4, he would fight that. Let me ask you this, Ascon. Do you not think there is a case, because as Raila Amolo Odinga talks about, he talked about reforming institutions and also brought up perhaps we need to re-look at the constitution as was proposed in the BBI. Don't you think there is a case to also address
I think
this?
Raila Odinga has a history of fighting for the reforms of institutions in this country. That we cannot take away from him. We know his history with ensuring that the IEBC was structured in the manner in which it is structured today. The Supreme Court as it is, so many institutions that Raila Odinga has contributed in ensuring that they are well structured. When he expresses reservations in the manner in which IEBC conducts itself, that does not necessarily mean that he is fighting the IEBC. He's only trying to point out that should there be any fissures and faults within IEBC that need to be rectified and reorganized, then I don't think anybody should think that is an attack on the IEBC. Equally, Raila Odinga is somebody who, I think by nature, wants to fight for what he feels is right. And I think that is what he has inculcated in so many of us and so many of his supporters. So whenever we feel that something is not happening in the right manner, we express ourselves very unequivocally. So I don't think we should take it as though Raila Odinga is fighting the IEBC. He's just pointing out that whenever we shall establish that there are some challenges within the IEBC that need to be addressed, then we shall go full length and address them. Also, you could realize that on the judiciary, we know that there are specific directions through which anybody who feels that you know, some changes should be made in the judiciary should go. But that does also not take away, you know, our right to express ourselves and tell the people of Kenya that we feel frustrated by the manner in which the judiciary conducted itself. You know, Kenya is an adversarial system, so to say, where we have two opposing sides, and there's a neutral arbiter to listen to both of these sides and make a determination. The determination can only be fair when each party feels that they were well taken care of. It cannot be fair only when, I mean, it can never be fair that both parties win. But even in the laws, the party should feel that, you know, the court was fair enough, you know, the court was able to listen to them, the court was able to be, you know, courteous in the way they're addressing issues. So the fact that Raila Odinga spoke to the manner in which our judges expressed themselves equally does not point that he's fighting the judiciary. He's just expressing that our institutions must be reformed over and over, and it's a process that never ends.
All right, let's take a look now at the statement delivered by IEBC chairperson Wafula Chebukati as the governors are in Mombasa undergoing induction, and they will hold a council meeting and elect. They will hold a summit. That is actually the correct terminology. Hold a summit and elect their new leaders. So as they're in Mombasa, Kenya Kwanza in Naivasha, Azimio are in Stony Athi, the IEBC is also in Mombasa, effectively reviewing the performance in the election. And this is what Wafula Chebukati had to say yesterday. Now, apart from the foregoing, the chairman and commissioners, Professor Abdi Gulie and Boya Mulu, were subjected to character assassination by Raphael Tuju, who falsely tried infer ill motive to a visit to him by the three of us when he was involved in a gruesome road accident that nearly claimed his life. He attempted to take advantage of a benevolent gesture of visiting him in 2021. At his own invitation while recuperating from his injuries to achieve the malicious end of maligning our image before the public. All these unfortunate incidences that border on criminal culpability cannot be swept under the carpet and assume a normal state of affairs. We must confront and address this issue in order to secure a conducive environment for staff to discharge their duties without fear of unlawful reprisals. As we deliberate, we remain alive to addressing these issues with finality. I wish to thank Commissioners Professor Abdi Gulie and Boya Molu and the Commission Secretary CEO for standing with me in upholding the will of the people. These three gentlemen are patriots who are willing to stand in harm's way to protect the sovereign power of the people of Kenya. I equally wish to thank the staff at the National Tallying Center for braving harassment and intimidation in their duty to ensure that all election results were verified and tallied. All right, so gentlemen, I'm curious what you make of these remarks by the IBC chairperson. Nathaniel?
First of all, I want to commend IBC for doing an exemplary work. If you look at the entire election cycle, clearly IBC was well prepared. And at my desk in the party, as director of ICT and programs, I interact with IEBC on a day-to-day basis, or rather in a regular basis, because we were preparing, processing nominations, we were processing most of the correspondence between IEBC and the party, especially on the interface on ICT matters. So I'm very well aware on the state of preparedness of IEBC towards this general election. To say the least, they did a splendid job. If you look at the ICT infrastructure they put in place, the entire processes that they put in place in the election was marvelous. I think they did a good job as it was recommended by the Kriegler Commission and many other commissions that have made recommendations on the management of the elections. Obviously, we need to improve a lot of things going forward. Even the judges in their ruling, you could see they made some statements regarding the management of IBC as a constitutional commission. So what we can do as a public is to extract what the judges said, and I'm hoping in their full reasoned judgment, we'll be able to get details on the issue of the division within the commission and also the management of the entire election process. But in my opinion, it was very unfair for the government through the state agencies to try and twist the will of the people. the constitution is very clear. The president is declared with 50% plus 1 vote. So that means that 1 vote in the face of a democracy is a majority vote, because it makes the all difference. So any other way, as we could see being canvassed in the Supreme Court, that somebody wanted to twist, to moderate results, so that to force a relearn, would have plunged this country in an unprecedented constitutional crisis. So I think Chebukati did a good job in terms of standing and executing his mandate as the chairperson. But also the judges called him out because they told him that it is not the chairperson's role only to read out the results or verify the results or tally the results. However, we could see the others were involved and the judges pronounced themselves as such. Therefore, the entire process of the election might not be perfect, because the elections are never perfect. But the entire process was well managed. That's why you've seen I've not filed a petition. I think I've accepted defeat that I lost fairly, and I'm contented with the 5,000 people who voted for me. And I'm not contesting the results because I feel the election was quite transparent. However, we could see on the question of the 4 commissioners, I think it was very reckless on their part, and the judges pronounced themselves as such. It was very reckless on the part of the 4 commissioners to try and disown results that they did not know. Secondly, it was very wrong because the 4 commissioners could have taken the country into a serious political and constitutional crisis, because they were viewed as the majority commissioners, and the country was seeing these commissioners as representing the views of the commission, and therefore, were it not for the restraint that was exercised by the public, probably will not be speaking of a country called Kenya, because elections are very vicious. So I think the petition that is lying before Parliament by the Farmers' Party, led by Rungu Nyakera, should be canvassed fairly. We should wait for the full reasoned judgment to see what the judges had to say about that matter.
All right.
But I think I commend IBC for the good work they did, not because we won the elections, but because I'm aware of the process that they put in place.
All right, as Director of ICT.
Yes.
Karidhi, what is your proposal on what needs to happen as far as IBC is concerned? Because clearly there is a trust deficit, not just between Kenyans and the IBC, but within IEBC itself, going by the events that transpired in the course of the presidential election. In fact, how Wafula Chebukati has put it is that we need to deal with this. He says, actually, as we deliberate, we remain alive to addressing these issues with finality. IEBC has been plagued with these shenanigans, for lack of a better word, and I do not mean to use less than judicial language, but has been plagued by this. I remember Rosalyn Akombe, the 3 other commissioners who resigned thereafter. How, in your mind, can we address this trust deficit with finality?
First, I want to tell my brother, Gidi, I wasn't really using unkind words once. What I was trying to say is that Raila should pass on the baton, and so if you got me wrong, I apologize for that.
All right, and he's apologized. Kidi, you accept his apology? All right.
Maybe what I would say about the kind of show that we saw that particular moment is that maybe what we need to look at is that Chebukati as the chairperson, how we wish that now it doesn't remain in him, you know, it should be transferred to the next chairman. And I'm not saying this, as Nathaniel is saying, this because we won the election, but you see when you look at it, it is the IBC that held this country together, because the kind of drama that we saw on that day, it was unfortunate, you know, the screens were split into 2, and one function is saying this, the other one is saying this. But I give it to Chebukati, you know, he stood his ground, and the Supreme Court ruling, you know, really affirmed his authority, or really affirmed his statement, or what he announced that day. And therefore, what I would suggest, or rather my opinion is, we really need to give the democratic, this independent institution, you know, the space to operate, because the management of an election process is not really so simple. And what I recommend, or what I find good, is the fact that from the 2013 Supreme Court petition, 2017, 2022, they have really strengthened the management, and the process of our elections, because the judges will give their ruling. Remember, in 2017, the judges say that the election starts and ends at the polling station, and this really what happened. And that's why maybe in their description, they say this is hot air, because in the ruling in 2017, they said that the election would start and end at the polling station. There is none of the petitioners who went to ask anything about what happened, transpired, or even announced at the polling station. They were talking about transmission. They were talking about foreigners. And the elections were done, dusted, completed, announced at the polling station. And that's why in their ruling in 2017, they gave us this, I would call it magic signal, that anybody, everybody, if you are doing an election, put your focus at the polling station. And that's why the issue of the agents comes in very strongly. Every serious person, and my brother here, at that particular moment during the election day, they had what they used to call the system, or the deep state, but they were not able to have the agents in each and every polling station. And therefore, that's where they would have had any evidence, if there was any. But I believe there was no evidence. I believe they lost fairly. I believe the IBC, as the function led by Chebukati, really put this country into good shape. You remember, everybody was, the eyes in all the world, all over the world were looking at Kenya, what is going to happen. And I think we have shown that our democracy have really grown. And going forward, we are also waiting to see how the Supreme Court, in their full judgment, what they are going to say, which gaps we need to seal, to ensure that going forward, we doesn't have such kind of a repeat, And what I would urge my brothers here is that we don't really need to have a function in the IEBC. Like, for example, when you go back, the 4 commissioners who had an issue with Chebukati, they were all appointed during the same time. And maybe this brings back, the integrity question, and how we go forward in having the commissioners in place. We really need to strengthen the process of ensuring that when we are getting people in those offices, we are getting the competent people, we are getting the right people for that job, not because they know a person. Because when you listen to all the manners of accusation, is that so-and-so is so's friend, so-and-so is a friend to this one. We need to come out of that bracket. We need to move forward as a country. We need to look at individuals as people who are competent, people of good character, and we doesn't have to be afraid that it is my brother who is seated there. We need to have the confidence of this independent institution that irrespective of the person seated in that office, we are going to get justice.
Appointment on merit.
On merit, that's it.
And I'd like us to move on to the conversation on the youth stake in this government. But I will allow you, I will give you the opportunity. Don't worry, Askan, I will come to you. Kitty?
No, because I'm going to lose this. Just briefly, I think even as we cast aspersions and maybe bash the 4 commissioners of the IBC, we must, regardless of which side of the political divide somebody supports, we must accept that Kenya is really moving very fast ahead of our peers in the continent, in the region. The fact that we have a court to present our case before, we have an IBC we can subject to some form of litigation, and they can be questioned. I think those are some of the things that we need to be proud of as a country. And going forward, just as Raila Odinga has said yesterday, while a good portion of the country might not be agreeing with him, we need to just work on how to refine our institutions and make them better and better. The question of the recruitment, I'm not really convinced that the aspects of integrity, stems from the recruitment process, because really, even when this recruitment was being done, I think the LSK was represented. At that time, the LSK chair was Nelson Harvey, who was a candidate on UDA. The religious community was represented, the Christians, the Muslims, almost every sector of the economy in our country was represented in the panel that did the recruitment of these four commissioners. So I don't think it stems from the recruitment process. It is just a question of morality and the conscience of a person. If they feel that things were not happening correctly, I think they should speak about it. If they are being used by some people, as others are alleging, then equally their conscience should direct them to cease henceforth. So I think that is the way we should run our country, not just at the level of commissioners within our independent commissions, but equally at the most basic level, at the school, you know, at our everyday life. You're supposed to be guided by your conscience. You're supposed to be guided by the view that you want the country to move forward.
All right. Kidi, I want to hear your thoughts on this. How do we arrive at this finality? As we deliberate, we remain alive to addressing these issues with finality.
Let me say this. We have a president in office who has taken oath of office already. And they say that a society gets the leadership that it deserves. So a point has come for us as the people of Kenya when we have President William Samoei Ruto. It is my sincere hope that President Ruto will conduct himself in a manner that represents, that shows that he is the finest aspiration and representation of the people of Kenya. That people of Kenya want to move from, you know, relative poverty into, you know, what you'd call upward social mobility. So as such, I think that the election being behind us, we must also point out to the failure by all the players in the political space in the last 5 years to ensure that we had an IBC that everyone could trust. Because the ideal is we should all esteem to have an electoral body that you can trust your worst enemy with. When we were going into 2017, I did not vote for President Kenyatta and Deputy President Ruto because I was not persuaded by their political philosophy. So then the political side that I was in was demanding for electoral reforms, electoral justice. So eventually when we had the handshake, it was we had legitimate expectations that the question of electoral reforms would have been pursued to its logical conclusion. I must admit today that I am a little frustrated that agenda was not pursued aggressively. And instead, it was attempted to be done through other omnibus changes through the BBI. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a mistake. A mistake because of the political nature of our elections and management of our elections. So had we divorced it from all other issues we wanted to achieve at a go, we would have had a chance to have an opportunity to critically look at IBC, look at the gaps, and possibly be able to answer ourselves to the ultimatums that we had issued to the IBC in 2017 that we called irreducible minimums. Thank you.
Speaking of irreducible minimums, we now move on to the conversation we are engaging on canvassing this morning, and that is the irreducible minimums for the constituency, because you all come from different parties, but you are one constituency. You represent one constituency, and that is the youth. My director, who is in my ear, Jackie, if we could have the Kenya Kwanza Youth Charter portion on leadership and governance. Several commitments were signed to by William Ruto as regarding the youth and leadership and governance. As far as that charter is concerned, they have reaffirmed the need to include the young people in decision-making, policy formulation, evaluation, and implementation. How do they plan to do so? By according to young people increased visibility, access, and participation in the decision-making process and policy implementation. Facilitating the effective participation and inclusion of youth in the national development planning process and preparation of policies that affect the youth. Making the youth ministry a standalone ministry headed by youth, dedicated to the eco-social and socio-political development of youth in Kenya. Appointing 30% of youth in all appointive positions in government, that is corporate mentorship policy, and county administrators be given to the youth. Modernizing the recruitment process into the police sector, focus on the academic qualifications rather than physical ability. Restructuring the National Youth Service on matters functionality and curriculum. And reviving the National Youth Council and funding its operations. Having the presidential address on matters of youth development on International Youth Day. So a standalone ministry for the youth, 30% representation as far in corporate entities as far as administration of the country is concerned. A national youth address on International Youth Day. What do you make of all these commitments, Nathaniel? Why are you involved in this drafting process?
Yes, very well. I'm very aware of the Kenya Kwanza Youth Charter, and it also started from the ANC party because when I started my politics, I started as the national youth leader of ANC party back in the year 2018. So I'm very, very aware because internally in our party, we have mainstreamed the youth charter. So we have a very robust youth charter that many other parties like KANU and UD have copy-pasted, which is a very good thing for the country. When we consolidated into a coalition, all the young people in the Kenya Kwanza coalition from all the political parties came together and they said that we need to have a charter, a document or a tool in which we will be able to negotiate within the rank and file of the coalition. And I'm very happy the leader of the Kenya Kwanza, that is now the President Ruto, together with all the other principals in the Kenya Kwanza coalition, appended their signature to these commitments. So it's very good. At least we have a solid document upon which young people can be able to negotiate not only the issues of leadership and governance, but also a document that puts the young people at the center of the discussion on socio-economic development of this country. Because the youth constituency, if you look at the demographics by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, young people constitute the largest percentage of the Kenyan population, especially the ages between 18 and 35 years. This is the largest constituency in terms of even the vote. If you look at the voting cohorts within IBC register, the voters between 18 and 35 years constitute one of the largest voting cohorts within that spectrum. So this is a very huge demographic that should be taken advantage of. In fact, we call it the demographic dividend. The energy, the creativity, the talent of young people should be tapped into. So the Kenya Kwanza Youth Charter is a very good instrument. For instance, you've seen historically, there were attempts to try and integrate young people into the governance, the decision-making process of this country through an animal called the National Youth Council. It is still there. Way back in 2010 when it was put into an act of parliament, the government stifled the National Youth Council because they didn't want young people to organize or arrange themselves all the way from the villages, the locations up to the national level. So the National Youth Council as a state corporation has not been well funded. In fact, the highest budget allocation that has ever gone to the National Youth Council is maybe perhaps 98 million. I know the CEO, Roy Sasaka, very well, and we know these challenges within that state corporation. So the commitments that Kenya Kwanza has put forward in terms of reviving the operations of the National Youth Council is a good one. The issues of realigning the National Youth Service, which is a very critical element of imparting skills, essential life skills on young people, is a very, very good element. The issue of creating a standalone ministry in the cabinet headed by young people is a very, very good commitment. However, not just the issue of the standalone ministry. The young people should be mainstreamed and integrated in all sectors and spheres of governance. Not just having a one-alone ministry, because it is going to relegate young people. Anytime they have an issue, they will be told, you have a standalone ministry. You can be able to go to your ministry. No. We want young people to be able to approach the whole of government, be mainstream in the whole of government. If you look at other jurisdictions, for example, in Europe or in the United States, young people are leaders of government. For instance, if you go to Finland, the Prime Minister of Finland is barely 32 years old, Sarah Marin. That is a very a very powerful position. If you go to many other countries, like for example Denmark, the Prime Minister is female, not a youth, but relatively young, and they're leading key government institutions. So the point here is, young people should be able to accept the idea of being mentored and graduate progressively into the main stage and be able to even compete, and we organize ourselves in a manner in which we are able to canvass the issues, the national issues, the nationalistic agenda as a population. I don't see anything that hinders us. I've also seen other commitments other than the issue of the leadership and governance. If you look at the Kenya Kwanza manifesto called the plan, there is the issue of the digital superhighway and the creative economy that has been promised, mostly focusing on the young people. The president has promised to introduce in the parliament the creative economy bill to capture or tap into the talent, the arts and crafts, the music, the creativity of young people. And they have promised to invest a lot of monies in the subsequent financial years to be able to invest in this economy. Because the plan is looking at a scenario where we will be able to export jobs, just like Philippines is doing, just like China and many other countries are exporting jobs, especially in the software industry, the creative industry. This is something that we should focus on. And if we are lucky to have young people at the highest levels of decision making, then they should be able to focus on these particular sectors so that you can see more young people who are unemployed. At the moment, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics is saying we have 16 million Kenyans who are capable of working, but they don't have the means of serving themselves. That means we should be able to have people who are innovative, people who think very fast and be able to come up with solutions that all the stakeholders are able to agree and we're able to move the country forward. Okay. So it's not just about young people occupying positions of leadership and governance, which is a very good thing, and I'm advocating for many of them to be allocated. When the president is naming his cabinet, hopefully we are able to see more youth, women, and all these other sectors of society represented.
All right, so we need to take a break. But when we come back, I'd also like to hear from Karithi, Kidi, and Ascon on what their expectations are as President William Ruto prepares to name his cabinet. And it's not just a cabinet, we're expecting appointments across the government. So what are your expectations? And then, Karithi, perhaps how do you onboard the likes of Kidi and Ascon? We take a break, see you on the other side.
Mivida Garden City, a residential development within Garden City offering stunning 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments, unique amenities, and an urban green convenient living. Call us today on 0722 123 000. Mivida, my home, my life.
Mkubwa, yes sir. Nimekama hapa biashara.
Umetoboa na hiyo Lexus yako.
Hai, aiwezi make. Mkubwa.
In the Cooperative Bank pre-owned car finance scheme, anyone with an income can walk into a second-hand dealership and drive out with a car that best suits them.
Hi.
With financing options from Coop Bank, it's that simple. Talk to us to find out more.
One of the main moments of the event definitely has to be the swearing-in session of Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua.
May I request that we take it again, please?
To the best of my judgment.
So when you're out there, probably you're wondering why you're just seeing people deployed
outside the vehicles and inside the vehicles. As I said, confidentiality, integrity, and availability.
The routes that you're using and the people you'll be coming into contact with. So that is what will basically define a formation.
Yeah. So that's what. So the formation for Tuesday's inauguration was because they knew they were going through Githurai.
Yes.
Now this is what we call convergence. Come through for the morning fix this and every single Friday right here on NTV. Yes, it's about that time.
You know, the coolest thing about mornings is that a girl and two guys together in the mix, you never know what to expect. You guys are crazy.
From Friday 6, bring your good vibes, bring your picks. From 7 a.m., it's a dope mix. Every single thing on Friday changes with a morning fix.
I went flexer, yeah.
Welcome back to AM Live. We're discussing the youth stake in the Kenya Kwanza government. A number of promises have been made. Increased visibility, access and participation in the decision-making process and policy implementation, facilitating the effective participation and inclusion of youth in the national development planning process and preparation of policies that affect youth, making the youth ministry a standalone ministry headed by the youth, appointing 30% of youth, 30, please note, in all appointive positions in government. So women, we are getting 50, you guys are getting 30, all right? County administrators be given to the youth, modernizing the recruitment process into the police sector, focus on the academic qualifications rather than physical abilities, restructuring the National Youth Service on matters functionality and curriculum, reviving the National Youth Council that you made reference to, Nathaniel, and funding its operations, and having the presidential address on matters of youth development on the International Youth Day. The youth are usually a big consideration during campaigns. And so how do we move? I suppose this is a question. How do we move from what we've traditionally seen, mnatumiwa vibaya wakati wa campaign, mnasahaulika serikali ikiundwa? Karidhi.
Let me first acknowledge and appreciate the fact that even before we go to the appointment, we have so many young people who were elected, you know, during these 2022 general elections. We have a substantive number, you know, that is representing the young people, both at Senate, Parliament, and also in the county assemblies. And that's a good signal that going forward you have the agendas of the young people being taken care of by the young people themselves. Because even when you talk about appointments, you know, they doesn't really have the much needed authority. But when they're in the assembly where policies and key decisions are made and passing of laws, I mean, we have the required representation. So I'm confident about that, and we are wishing that all those who have been elected as young people, they really wake up to the call and really show up that young people can be trusted with the leadership, so that going forward we can have that transition keeping on, and we're moving from 30% to 40%, maybe in 2032 we should be having 60% of the people who have been elected as young people. But I'm not forgetting that I'll be growing old by then, maybe I'll be past 30 years, 35 years, but it's something that is good, because when you check factors of development, one of them is when you talk about human resource, then we have technology being one of the key driving forces that really factors when it comes to economic development. And when you come to talk about technology, the people who are conversant with technology are the young people, and therefore giving them a chance to be in leadership is really going to help the economic development. And when it comes to appointment, you know, Deputy President himself pronounced himself very clearly, and we from Kenya Kwanza are inviting our friends here to come on board, because we can't afford to leave them behind. We have to move the country progressively. We have to have everybody on board to ensure that as we move forward, we are ensuring that we are protecting the future, as a whole country, but not just the people who elected William Samoei Ruto. And therefore, it's good that my brothers here agreed to be on board. We move forward so that even if they might not get the appointments, or if they get the appointments, we have to see the young people, having the face of the nation on board, and ensuring that going forward, everything that is going to be articulated or everything that is going to happen, really carries the aspirations of the young people. Because at the end of the day, what we really need to focus on is to ensure that there is jobs creation, to ensure that a majority of the young people who are struggling in the village and even the urban centers really have a place to earn a living. Because at the end of the day, irrespective of which government is in place, what is much important is to have the young people well taken care of, so that as we move forward, nobody is left behind. But what is really aspiring about William Ruto's presidency, from day one, he made bold decisions, and we're expecting that even going forward in what he promised the young people, he's going to live to his commitment and ensure that we have substantive representation when it comes to the young people. Forming a youth ministry, I wouldn't really say something that would make me feel that every young person is accommodated, because they're talking about just 2, 3, 4, 5 positions. But what really drives me when I hear William Ruto talk about the TVETs, remember here is where he's really, seen as if he's going to put too much energy to ensure that we have skilled labor. When we talk about manufacturing, when we talk about housing, what I would want maybe those who do the curriculum development is to come back and look. Those young guys who are at the university, and maybe the courses they did are not really, well absorbed in the market. What do we do with them? Do we come with a policy that is going to give a short-term courses? Maybe I graduated from Moi University with a social science course, but then the demand in the job market is that we need technicians, we need welding, we need plumbers and everything. How do we also incorporate these young people, who really went to school, did courses that today cannot be absorbed in our job market, because they are not in line with the aspiration of the incoming government. Therefore, I would urge the curriculum developers to come on board and look at it. How do we also not leave these young guys behind? Because one, they invested their time, they invested in education, their parents have high hopes, and today they are at home, arguing poverty. And the other thing that I wouldn't want us to leave behind is the issue to do with drug abuse. The government must come forth and really with a lot of force to ensure that drug abuse is a thing of the past in this republic, because when you have too much young people who are unemployed, they're doing nothing. The next thing they engage in is drug abuse. Therefore, we need to call a spade a spade. We need to call the national police, led by the IG, to really crack down on illegal substances. We have the proliferation of drugs coming from some of our neighboring countries. But what I would want is that the police also ensure that everybody plays their role. Because when you cannot tell me that we have every morning in court, we have more than 20 guys who have been arrested for abuse of drugs, more so bangi. But we have not had any person being arrested for allowing, for relaxing the laws. Because it's the police who man these areas. We have entry points in each and every border. But who is accountable for such? We need to know if a person is arrested trafficking drugs from a certain region, then every police officer who was manning, who was on traffic, who was in charge on that specific area should be accountable. We cannot have police or rather alleged that they take bribes to allow these things to happen. And then at the end of the day, we are going to lose this country. We are going to lose our future. Therefore, the issue of drug abuse, to me is a concern. And going forward, we really need to focus on it. And maybe lastly, I would also say that, in respect to youth aspirations, we also need to have the government coming on board to act on climate actions. Because at the end of the day, if we don't take care of the environment, we don't take care of the climate, then there is no future. And you see, for me, maybe I'll hang around for the next 70, 80 years. So I need to feel protected, as a young person today. Therefore, It's very important to have the government, really take care of the environment, have the climate actions to ensure that, there is posterity, there is growth, there is future. And I would call it, I would give it to William Ruto because he really gave quite good promising, and I believe in him. We are here to support him. We support his administration. We campaign for him. And you see, when we talk about the representation of the young people, we in Kenya Kwanza, we are running the campaigns. We did not have any relegation duties. In the other area, there were, the youth felt relegated. They had
Okay,
created,
let's hear from them.
they had created their own
Let's hear
league.
from them if they felt relegated. But the point you make, and you make very good points about how do we accommodate these people who have these degrees, but the demand is for, let's say, people who have technical skills. And you've also talked about an idle mind being the devil's workshop. Kiddy, did you feel relegated in the campaigns? And as you answer that, given you're the one who likes using these quotes, you're normally the one who elevates me where this is concerned. Who is it who said, Google, kama ujui. Who is this who said, ask not what your country can do for you?
That is JF Kennedy.
I thought so. So do you tell me, what do you make of the commitments made by Kenya Kwanza as far as accommodating the youth in leadership? What would you like to see as William Ruto prepares to name his cabinet and make various other appointments?
The commitment points to a critical first step in the right direction because it must be pointed out that the 5 critical needs of a young person, over and above education, training, skill set development, and employment, is representation. Not only in the legislature, but also in the boards of, in the executive boards and in the, of corporates and non-profits. So that when we have more young people in the room, it means that by and large, they shall be able to speak to their needs. And when they speak to the needs of a typical young person, it means a young person who is not in that room can then have his interests taken care of. Because we are looking at everyone is talking about appointment to the cabinet. We are talking about state sector jobs that is about 800,000 to 1 million. That is the entire state sector jobs from the presidency to the devolved units and all. Our government, the government of Kenya, the national government, is struggling with the question of the wage bill. And it is a problem that has also replicated itself in most of the devolved units. So therefore, the government of William Ruto has got the urgent responsibility to make sure that he is able to inspire investment in areas that can then bring ripple effect in a thriving private sector. So that a young person who has an idea can have that idea transform into a business, and it is a business that then can employ other young people. In so doing, we must also remember that we hope that they are able to deal with the question of a criminal justice system that is constantly anti-young people. So that we have young people who are constantly viewed by the police or by the players in the criminal justice system as criminals. So that you are guilty until you are proven innocent, instead of the reverse. In so doing, by and large, it stifles the contribution of young people into the economy. Because young people say do not want to be out late out of the fear of running into problems with the police. Young people being too timid in their country and therefore not being able to participate effectively. So we hope that we will eventually have a criminal justice system that is pro-young people. But then I must add a rider that in all the flowery words by our friends in government today, we hope that words of Mario Cuomo do not come to life.
Yeah, there you go.
That politicians campaign in poetry, but govern in prose. Thank you very much.
That's interesting.
Ascon, what do you make of those commitments made by Kenya Kwanza where the youth is concerned in the areas of leadership and governance? And also I'm curious, the public wage bill was addressed by Kitty. Would you want to see the CAS position retained?
Well, first and foremost, I think I must express that I'm a bit disappointed by the turnout of the youth in the last election, considering that the basis upon which we were demanding to be included on both sides of the political divide was the fact that we control a massive fraction of the voter register. And unfortunately, a good number of young people did not turn out, did not go to the polling stations, did not take part in these elections. I think that should change going forward. But having said that, there's not so much difference between the Azimio manifesto and the Kenya Kwanza manifesto, in regards to the youth question. You'll realize that a good number of what William Ruto was promising the young people was bordering almost on the same things Raila Odinga was promising the young people. So it's not about the cosmetics and the beauty of the manifestos and the youth charter and stuff. The beauty is in the implementation of what has been proposed in these manifestos and in these charters, so to say. I must say that I'm very impressed by the manner in which William Ruto executed his first address, and it pointed to the fact that he's a bit action-oriented and hands-on. The promises he had made to Kenyans during the campaign period. At the very outset, he talked about them on his inauguration, and he pointed towards implementing them. So I'm looking forward to a cabinet where we have a youth ministry headed by Nathaniel or my brother Maina Karobia. Oh, I have so many friends in Kenya Kwanza. But I'm looking forward to a ministry of youth, that is being headed by the youth that we know and that are the representative face of the young people of this country. I'm looking forward to 30% of government jobs given to the young people. I'm looking forward to a lot of attention given to young people in terms of government jobs and appointments. But that's not really what is ailing the country. As I said, even in the run-up to the elections, our economy is buckled under the weight of unemployment. And this unemployment really just hurts a good number of the population, that is the youth demography. So we cannot try to bundle everybody into government appointments. There are so many people, one, who probably are not interested in being employed in government. Others are not interested in doing the white-collar jobs. Exactly. So we have to find a solution to ensure that we make employment accessible, job opportunities accessible to the youth down at the base of the stratum, to give them a chance to execute on their ideas. How do we make the business environment friendly? I listened to Senator Sakaja the other day talk about sorry. my mind is still in 2017.
We're all adjusting, we're all adjusting.
But I listened to Governor Sakaja the other time, and he was talking about how to condense the licenses into one piece and to make them affordable to the young people. Those are some of the ideas I think would be able to assist young people do business. If you give the young people business, if you give the young people jobs, they won't care who is appointed as their minister. That is just a representative fraction of the population, and that is only supposed to serve to represent their views where it matters, to represent their views at the cabinet, to represent their views when the president is having a meeting. But not every young person would want to be the minister for youth. Once Akadima is in the cabinet and he speaks for me, I think I'd be satisfied enough. I don't have to be there. Once my brother Karobe is somewhere, he speaks for me, I'll be happy to know that my interests are well taken care of. That is basically the thinking of the large population of the young people in this country. They want their young people to be a representation of their ideas and their interests. But having said that, there's this concern about our young people who get opportunities of leadership and they turn into wild animals. They cease to be the young people that we thought they would be when they get positions of power. Power gets into their minds. They forget that they're supposed to take care of the interests of young people. They forget that they're supposed to fight for the young people. They go into some things that really are not very impressive. So it is a motivation, and it's equally a challenge to the young people who will get into positions of power, whether appointive or elective. You have to keep it in mind that you are the representative face of the young people of Kenya, and everybody expects that you're going to represent us accordingly, so that even in the near future, when others get that opportunity, it will be a vote of confidence of the young people of Kenya.
All right. right. Ascon Nathaniel is talking like a bottom-up fella. He says, we don't care so much who is up there, but create opportunity down here. He's also, like you made reference to animals, he says some young people turn into wild animals. You talked about this animal called the National Youth Service. There was talk of amending the standing orders in the National Assembly to allow cabinet secretaries make statements on the floor of the House, as opposed to committees, or rather as opposed to exclusively committees who then now come back and report to the House. This debate between who should occupy these top rungs, right? Politicians or technocrats, what's your view?
First of all, I want to thank Ascon for canvassing and lobbying for me publicly. I hope the president is watching.
Thank you.
But I also want to say that it is Abraham Lincoln who said that when you're forming government, one of the best decisions he did in the US was to form what we now call the team of rivals. If you read Abraham Lincoln's book, The Team of Rivals, he picked his rivals, his fiercest opponents, and they formed sort of what we could call a grand coalition government. So I hope the president, while forming his cabinet or his government, reorganizing the government, is able to identify other key people who have the mind and the attitude to help him achieve the Kenya Kwanza manifesto. If he's able to identify that, then he'll be able to reach out across the political spectrum and actually tap into the other minds that are not necessarily in the Kenya Kwanza rank and file. So back to the question that you asked, I think, and I want to agree with all the gentlemen here, that we need to approach the issue of integrating young people into all spheres of life from the bottom up. And that's why we came up with a manifesto called the bottom up. But we used to say the Kamentrel, the bottom up, Pesa Mfukoni, Kenya Kwanza. That was our clarion call throughout the campaign. And I think the president means it. We want to see his implementation matrix, how he's going to implement the manifesto. If you read through the Kenya Kwanza manifesto, because I've read it twice, it is a well-detailed document with a clear implementation plan, with even specific budgets from this financial year to this financial year. They have even segmented the implementation of the manifesto from the quick wins to the short term, medium term, and the long term. What is to be done immediately in the 6 months? What is to be done between 6 to 18 months? What is to be done between 18 to 36 months? And what is to be done up to 5 years and beyond? So it is a detailed document, and I hope he's able to get the right team, assemble the right talent to be able to help him implement that manifesto. On the issue, for example, the issue that the Kenya Kwanza manifesto speaks largely that is going to create more jobs and create a ripple effect in the economy is the issue of agriculture. And they have identified 5 value chains, from dairy to poultry to crops, such as maize, the bananas, the coffee, the tea. They are value chains they have identified in the Kenya Kwanza manifesto that are going to be able to create jobs immediately. For instance, on the dairy sector, the manifesto is speaking to the issue of doubling the income, the milk production from the current average of 18 liters per cow to 35 liters. That is what the manifesto is speaking into. That means the dairy farmer will be able to get double the income and be able to increase the milk production in the country. Same goes to the maize farmers. That's why you saw the president from day one, he is announcing the fertilizer and he's scrapping off the subsidy so that we are able to have a long-term view. And I like the approach the president is taking, a long-term view of the solutions instead of going for the shortcut and then at the end of it, it's very costly.
Okay, so do you think politician, technocrat?
I think it should be a blend of talent. There are politicians actually who are very good in terms of communicating government agendas. And that's why, speaking to the question of cabinet appearing before parliament, it was disengaged from the 2010 constitution because we adopted a pure presidential system where cabinet is picked outside parliament. But in this case, we still have this constitution. Cabinet is picked from outside parliament, unless if he picks parliamentarians, they have to resign their positions so they're able to join cabinet. But I like the idea of increasing the levels of accountability in government by having members of cabinet appearing before the representatives of the people, just like what you used to see before in the former constitution, where CSs appear to respond to questions directly raised by members of parliament. This will increase the levels of accountability on the part of government. I'm waiting to see which parts of the standing orders they are going to amend, sort of to create that avenue for CSS to appear. Probably it will be a committee of the whole house or something like that, because the case is very different. Right now it is the chairperson of the relevant committees of parliament who pick the responses from CSS and then report to parliament. So they convert committee chairpersons to be defenders of government, when actually it is parliament and the parliamentarians who should be oversighting the executive, irrespective whether from the ruling party. Okay. So this is going to be a very good thing going forward. But generally speaking, the idea of young people being part and parcel of decision making is very good. We have also seen a lot of inhibitive conditions put on young people, especially on their work experience. And that's why if you look at the Kenya Kwanza Youth Charter, it is speaking about the issue of corporate mentorship, where young people are mentored progressively up the ladder so that they are able to have some skills so that the issue of experience, for example, I've seen a lot of adverts today from many counties demanding, declaring vacancies of chief officers, ministers in the counties. And if you look at the experience, number one is 10 years experience in government. How do you expect a young person to have 10 years in the experience in the private sector and government so they're able to take up those leadership positions? Okay. Whereas in the national level, we are seeing people who don't have the commensurate experience being appointed to very senior positions in government. So I think some of these things need to be moved out. Lastly, I want to speak to the issue of the Hustler Fund that has been promised in the Kenya Kwanza manifesto. Okay, just shikilia hapo ndo, because I'm seeing time is not on my side, so that we also hear from the other panelists. Karidhi, the position of CAS, would you like to see it retained?
I would say yes. Because one, it as we
he talked about corporate mentorship.
Mentorship, yeah, and it's from this position that we have young people, having a chance, to get in the leadership positions, to be able to participate in decision making and policy formulations, and they are mentored, to become future CS. And this is a good thing, and we ask the Deputy President to maintain the CS positions and to see to it that a majority of them, are given to the young people. But that doesn't just say that we also need the CS positions. Young people are the majority of this country. We contributed a lot in his campaigns. We contributed a lot in terms of votes, and therefore it should be not be minimal. It should be substantive, as you always say. And maybe the other thing I would end with and state is about the cost of loans. A majority of the young people, the fact that my good friend Ascon has said that the elective, the appointed position are just a representative. A majority of them are hustling back there. So what we need to do is also to create funding and affordable loans to ensure that young people can be able to start businesses and can fund their businesses accordingly without having to be asked for logbooks and what we call title deeds. Because like myself, if I was asked a title, I don't have one. My dad, there are 7 of them. The title is still in their father's, whatever. We are 7 of us. So in respect to that, and they're just 2 acres of land. So even if we share, it looks like a nursery. We just build homes there to live. Therefore, what we are asking this government is to be much more responsible. When we talk about youth fund, it really need to speak to the needs of the young people. It doesn't need to be the word of the National Youth Fund. It has to be that it reflects the aspirations, the needs of the young people. You don't have to be asked for, the only thing we have is a degree or an academic paper, and it's also costly. So they should give us loans equivalent to the cost of that degree or to that education, and we'll produce it in the shortest time possible, they ask. But asking us to produce logbooks and everything else, they are wasting us, and we are asking them
more responsive.
To be more, yeah, sure.
Okay, and gentlemen, I'll cheat you out of a few. You guys will finish in a tweet. I'm so sorry, but I'm really curious about this. This is something I'd really like addressed. And who is it who said the manifestos are not so different? You asked for the Azimio and
there's a big difference.
Nathaniel begs to differ. Nathaniel, this prime CS, what is it, Prime Cabinet Secretary,
Yep.
Vis-a-vis the Deputy President. In the Jubilee government, we saw William Ruto in the second term say, the President gave my roles to Fred Matiang'i, who was the super CS, as was popularly known. Do you not expect toes to be stepped on?
No, first of all, in the assembling of government and in the nature of politics, there are something called coalitions. If you look at the Political Parties Act, there is pre-election coalition agreements and post-election coalition agreements. So in Kenya Kwanza, we have entered both in pre-election and post-election coalition agreements. So in the pre-election coalition agreement of Kenya Kwanza, ANC negotiated successfully to be allocated certain responsibilities. So as a party, first of all, we negotiated that we produce the holder of the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary, sort of an equivalent of a government coordinator of all government projects, programs, and policies. We are going to nominate our party leader, Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, to occupy that position. We also negotiated 30% of all government positions, from cabinet secretary to PSS, any other appointment, ambassadors, high commissioners, and all that, jointly with Ford Kenya. So we have a stake in government as a political party. So we are going to see nominations from our party to those to occupy certain positions in government. Of course, they have to be accompanied by the HR manual in the public service. So it's going to be sort of a competitive process. We are going to nominate people who are capable, who have the requisite requirements. However, I don't see any, in terms of what we could call push and pull or onusumukate or any competition with the office of the Deputy President, because there is going to be a clear demarcation of duties and responsibilities between the President, the Deputy President, and the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary. And to say the least, Honorable Musalia Mudavadi has a cool, calm, collected demeanor. He is not an abrasive politician who is going to overstep the toes of others. So I don't foresee from our end and from the person we have nominated in the person of Musalia Mudavadi to step or overstep his mandate. In any case, we are going to see a stabilizing factor in government. So I welcome the creation of the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary.
All right, gentlemen, your last remarks.
I think the buck stops with the president. It really doesn't matter who is overstepping their mandate and those other stories. The push and pull can only come if the president permits it to happen. So I look at William Ruto as somebody who will take charge of his government and define clearly the roles of the deputy president and the prime cabinet secretary. You know, even in the constitution, it's the president who assigns roles to the deputy president. I don't think it would happen that one of them would just want to come from nowhere and start, you know, causing the unnecessary friction. So going forward, because this is just a young government that is coming up, William Ruto should take charge from the outset and ensure that you know, government operations continue and happen as they're supposed to. But having said that, there's this question of the position of the CSS. I had a good number of friends who were CSS in the other regime, and it was quite important. It helps in exposing young people to the manner in which government operations are undertaken. It exposes them to leadership at that level, and that is something that should not be dismissed as such. While our courts have expressed themselves on how this position should be, you know, midwifed and how it's supposed to be put in place, I think William Ruto has committed that he's going to, you know, keep to the rule of law. We expect that he's advised accordingly on the manner in which he can keep these CSS positions, if at all he is interested in doing that. But also, having said that, we also have to...
it was a tweet. It was a tweet as for kidding.
Yes. One thing I will not doubt about President William Ruto is his ingenuity, both as a politician and as a leader. And therefore, in regards to the question of CSS, I believe that in exercising of his infinite wisdom, he will find how to accommodate young people, whether they are CSS or not. Secondly, remembering the question of squibbling in government that my brother has mentioned, that there is a comment that was attributed to President Moi when he said that his government was more disciplined than the government of President Kibaki, wherein ministers in Kibaki's government were fighting each other. So I believe that President Ruto will put his foot down and ensure that his ministers one, not undermine one another, and secondly, that they serve the people. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much, Kidi. So we've had Askon Kamili this morning, youth policy analyst, Kidi Mwaga, Kanu Youth Congress, and as well as Karidhi Uamboi, who is a nominated MCA who's joining us who's come all the way from Nyeri to join us. He's been nominated by UDA Youth representative in the Nyeri County Assembly, and we also have Nathaniel Mongare, who contested the North Mugirango parliamentary seat, came in number 4 out of 17. Again, congratulations, both gentlemen, for that. See how you can accommodate the two. He currently serves as Director ICT and Programs.
Thank you for lobbying.
Host Olive Barras. Now, as we have our coffee, you get to have your morning fix with Monique and David. They're at the Nation FM studios. We are kicking off the weekend on the right note. That's it for me. Let's take a quick peek before we call it a day on AM Live. Our weekend, or rather my weekend, starts now.